Their smokescreen may work in the press most of the time, but I'm a little too articulate to take that kind of nonsense.
And I felt really angry at the lack of interest by the people that actually run this thing and who put it together. They didn't show up.
They're some of the biggest bands in the world. They've sold out stadiums on every continent. They defined entire genres of music, and they've inspired millions of us. So why does the very institution built to celebrate them act like they never existed? The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was supposed to be a monument, a celebration of the most powerful and influential music ever made. Instead, for a lot of fans, it became a total joke. Today, because a lot of you guys have requested it, let's take a look at the complete history of the Hall, from the secret committees and the bitter personal grudges to the corrupt decisions that turned it into one of the most hated institutions in all of music. Before we get started, be sure to hit that bell notification icon and put on all notifications. I hear from a lot of my subscribers that they don't get videos in their feed, and I would greatly appreciate if you guys did that. When the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame first started inducting artists back in 1986, the mission seemed pretty simple and noble: to honor the architects of the most vital musical movement of the 20th century. And that first class of inductees was a murderer's row of undisputed legends: Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, James Brown, and Ray Charles. It was a foundation built on a solid ground, promising to preserve a legacy. But then somewhere along the way, that promise got broken. What began as a great celebration has over the years devolved into something bitter, controversial, and deeply political. It's an organization that year after year leaves fans and even artists bewildered and angry, as foundational rock and metal bands are just ignored while artists from completely different genres are welcomed in. The story of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is no longer about who gets in, it's about who gets left out, and more importantly, why. It's a story of backroom deals, baffling logic, and a small group of insiders who get to decide what rock and roll even is. This isn't just a museum in Cleveland, it's become a battle for the soul of music history, and right now a lot of people feel the wrong side is winning. So how does a band get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? You're probably thinking it has something to do with album sales, cultural impact, or maybe the millions of fans who bought the records and the concert tickets. You would be wrong. The fate of rock's biggest legends actually rest in the hands of a small, anonymous nominating committee. This committee is a group of about 30 or 40 industry insiders, journalists, and executives, and they meet in secret every year to decide who even makes it onto the ballot. The only criteria is that a band has had to have had 25 years lapse between the release of their debut album. For years, critics have called this group out for being completely disconnected from the actual fans of the music. They operate with zero transparency, their logic is a total mystery, and their personal biases have shaped the Hall's roster for decades. The whole process has been a source of anger for artists almost since the beginning. Famously, back in 1999, Black Sabbath's Ozzy Osbourne publicly asked for his band to be removed from the ballot, writing a scathing letter that said the nomination is meaningless because it's not voted on by the fans. It's voted on by the supposed elite for the industry and the media who've never bought an album or a concert ticket in their lives, so their vote is irrelevant to me. Ozzy's words really cut to the heart of the problem. A lot of people feel the Hall wasn't created for the fans. It was created for the industry, and that industry has a very specific idea of what it considers worthy rock and roll. Now, the public does get a token fan vote, but its influence is laughingly small, counting as just a single ballot amongst more than 1,000. And we're seeing a huge test case for this right now in 2025. The band Phish won the fan vote by a massive margin, but their induction is still up in the air, which has a lot of people wondering if the Hall will listen or if it will just prove how little the fan vote really matters. The process isn't just flawed to its critics, it seems designed to protect the taste of a select few. It allows personal grudges and genre biases to run wild, and no genre has suffered more from this system than heavy metal. If you were to build a museum dedicated to rock and roll, you'd think that one of its most dominant and influential subgenres would be front and center. But for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it feels like heavy metal and hard rock might as well not exist. For decades, the nominating committee has shown what feels like an outright hostility towards the very bands that carried the torch for loud, aggressive, guitar-driven music. The list of metal and hard rock bands on the outside looking in isn't just long, it's insulting. Iron Maiden, one of the most successful and influential bands of all time, has been nominated but continues to be passed over. Motorhead, the band that fused punk and metal and created a sound that influenced practically everyone, has been nominated before but still isn't in. Then you have Slayer, Megadeth, Pantera. These bands of metal are just treated like a footnote. Radio host Eddie, I know everybody in that band Trunk, has been one of the Hall's most vocal critics, famously calling it the Hall of Shame. For years, he's been the voice of reason for frustrated rock fans, hammering the institution for its blatant genre bias. He once famously asked how you can have a Hall of Fame where it takes bands like Kiss and Rush 20 years to get in, but other bands get in on the very first ballot. Take Judas Priest. After decades of being eligible, they were finally inducted in 2022, but not as performers. Instead, they were given something called Musical Excellence Award. To many, that felt like a consolation prize, a way for the Hall to quiet down the angry metal fans without actually giving the band a full induction. It was like a pat on the head, not a real seat at the table. This doesn't feel like an oversight. It feels like a deliberate choice. The committee has historically been viewed as looking down on metal as some kind of lesser art form, crude, unsophisticated, and not worthy of serious consideration. They've allowed their personal taste to dictate history, erasing a massive part of rock and roll's story. And while these metal gods are left out in the cold, the Hall has been inducting artists who have little, if anything, to do with rock and roll at all. The single biggest controversy that follows the Hall of Fame is its increasingly confusing definition of rock and roll. While the essential rock bands are being told they aren't worthy, the institution has welcomed a flood of artists from pop, country, and hip-hop. Now, this isn't a new thing. The Hall has been inducting legends from other genres for years, like Madonna and Tupac Shakur. But in recent years, the debate has reached a boiling point. Take the 2022 induction of country superstar Dolly Parton. Even Dolly herself felt it was a mistake, and she gracefully tried to bow out, stating, "I don't feel that I've earned the right." The Hall refused her request and inducted her anyway. And in a bizarre twist, Dolly Parton then announced she would record a rock album just to validate her own induction, a move that only highlighted how absurd the whole situation had become. The induction of rappers like Jay-Z and Eminem, both musical legends in their own right, have sparked similar outrage from rock purists. And the trend continued in 2024 with the induction of icons like Mary J. Blige and Cher. Again, the issue for the critics isn't the incredible talent of these artists, it's the Hall's complete abandonment of its own mission. How can an institution that ignores Iron Maiden argue that it's preserving the history of rock and roll? Even Kiss's Gene Simmons weighed in, adding, "You've got Grandmaster Flash in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Run DMC in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You're killing me." That doesn't mean those aren't good artists, but they don't play guitar. They sample and they talk, not even sing. If you don't play guitar and you don't write your own songs, you don't belong there. The Hall's chairman, John Sykes, who had previously worked for MTV back in the day, had defended these choices by claiming rock and roll was always a gumbo of different styles, and even told Jay-Z that hip-hop is rock and roll. But to a lot of fans, this feels like a weak excuse for watering down the brand. Critics like Twisted Sister's Dee Snider have publicly said that if the Hall wants to induct artists from every genre, it should just change its name to the Music Hall of Fame. By refusing to do so, the Hall seems to be rewriting history. It's acting like an all-encompassing music hall while still trading on the cultural power of rock and roll. The identity crisis has made a mockery of the institution and led to a total breakdown of trust with the fans. And the disrespect doesn't stop with the snubs, it extends to the artists themselves. You would think that on the night of a legendary artist getting inducted, the Hall of Fame would roll out the red carpet, but for a lot of inductees, the experience has been anything but a celebration. In fact, some of the most damning criticisms have come from the very people the Hall claims to be honoring. The most infamous story comes from Steve Miller's induction in 2016. What should have been a big moment turned into a public relations nightmare. Miller went on this incredible tirade backstage, exposing how the Hall was treating its own artists. He revealed that he was only given 2 tickets, one for him and one for his wife. If he wanted more tickets, including for his band members, he had to pay $10,000 per seat. And he didn't get to choose who inducted him that night either. This gave me an even bigger amount of respect than I had for him.
The whole process needs to be changed from the top to the bottom. Doesn't need to be this hard. There's nothing fancy going on out there that requires all of this stuff. They need to get their legal work straight. They need to respect the artists they say they're honoring, which they don't. I don't have any of my paperwork is signed. I have no licensing agreements with these people. They're trying to steal footage. They're trying to make me indemnify them. When they told me I was inducted, they said you can have 2 tickets, one for your wife and one for yourself. Want another one? It's $10,000. Sorry, that's the way it goes. He said, I'm playing here. What about my band? What about their wives? What about... They make this so unpleasant that they came this close. No, we're not going to wrap this one up. I'm going to wrap you up. You go sit down over there and learn something. So here's what you need to know. This is how close this whole show came to not happening because of the way the artists were actually being treated right now. So I'll wrap it up right now. I think that the nominating committee of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is so up, and they're just so inbred and they're so off course. I think the only reason that I was asked to be in it now is because they had to do a TV show, and that's all the Hall of Fame was. There is no Hall of Fame. There was no party. They didn't introduce any of the inductees or the inductors. We never saw each other. There never was a little thing where they said, hey, this is the Hall of Fame and we're raising money and we're doing these music education programs and all that stuff. It was like, shut you don't do what we tell you to do, we're going to cut you from the show. And we go, really? Cut us from the show.
It's
And then
okay.
they'd say, all right, we're not going to cut you from the show and you can have 5 tickets for the band. We want tickets for the band, the wives and stuff. It just went on, and it was 3 months of insults and bull. And the actual event was a sound check that lasted 12 minutes, this kind of cocktail party on the mezzanine of the arena, then was sent out to a table where I sat down at a table and didn't know anybody, and the people that were in the front of us never even turned around to say hi. We just sat there. We went and played a couple of numbers. Then off for this press thing, and the first thing they go was like, hey, how do you feel that they didn't put you in for 23 years? You know, and you kind of go like, all of you people.
This experience isn't unique. The Hall has a long and messy history of inconsistent rules that seems to create drama between band members. When Kiss was finally inducted in 2014, the Hall decided to only include the 4 original members. This excluded guys like Bruce Kulick and Eric Carr, who had been in the band for over a decade.
I think we're the bitter pill that they had to swallow. At some point, their credibility is so in question because it's 14 years since we've been eligible. If I've done anything, I hope that I've shown people the little man behind the levers in The Wizard of Oz, because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is not the hall of the people. It's a small group of guys who decide who they want and who they don't, and then they decide what the rules are for you that don't apply to anybody else. So they wanted the original 4 guys to make the pill a little smaller. But we've had many members who have played on multi-platinum albums and played to millions of people. And it wasn't even a subject for discussion. They told me that it was a non-starter. That's arrogance that I don't have to put up with.
Here at CNN, got to show the other side. So let me just read this statement. I know you've probably read it
Absolutely.
before from the CEO of the Rock Hall, because he says he understands your perspective, but he says, I can't think of another band outside of Gwar that has members that are dressed up in costumes. You basically have these new members that are replicating exactly and playing the music that was created by the 2 other members that are being inducted. I know you guys are not performing tonight.
Let me say in response to that,
Go
it's
for it.
absolute nonsense, because we weren't talking necessarily about current members. We were talking about members who didn't wear makeup and played on Platinum Plus albums. So their smokescreen may work in the press most of the time, but I'm a little too articulate to take that kind of nonsense.
Yet just a few years earlier, when Metallica got in, they included bassist Robert Trujillo, who at the time had only been on one Metallica album. When Pearl Jam got inducted, Dave Abruzzese, who had played on both of the group's seminal records, Versus and Vitalogy, 2 of the band's most popular records, was not inducted. This kind of arbitrary decision-making creates these bitter disputes and leaves deserving musicians feeling like they've been erased from their own history. It's a pattern of disrespect that has led to a lot of artists refusing to even show up for their own inductions. The Sex Pistols famously sent a profanity-laced letter to the museum calling it a piss stain. Axl Rose declined to attend Guns N' Roses' induction because of all the band tensions, which the Hall seemed happy to use for TV drama. Even Paul McCartney skipped the Beatles' induction ceremony because of business disputes, calling the idea of a reunion at the event a fake reunion. Then you have artists like Motley Crue, whose bassist Nikki Sixx publicly stated that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame told the band they would never be inducted due to how the band had acted over the years. While drummer Tommy Lee expressed some openness to induction, Sixx emphasized that the band does not expect it and that it's not a big deal to them anymore. These aren't isolated incidents of rock star drama. They're symptoms of a deeply broken institution that seems to view artists not as legends to be honored, but as props to be used for a TV show. So is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame a joke? After decades of secret committees, genre snubs, inconsistent rules, and outright disrespect for artists, the answer to many people seems to be a resounding yes. What started as this noble monument to music has become a symbol of everything wrong with the music industry: elitism, commercialism, and a complete disconnect from the fans who give the music its power. The institution has created a reality where Dolly Parton is in, but Iron Maiden is still out. A world where rappers are welcomed, but the pioneers of heavy metal are told they don't belong. Where artists are charged thousands of dollars to celebrate their own legacy. The problem isn't just that they get it wrong sometimes. The problem for many is that the system feels like it's built to get it wrong. It's a system that prioritizes the tastes of a few insiders over the voices of millions. A system that values television ratings over historical accuracy. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has broken its promise. It's lost its credibility. And in the process, it has lost the respect of the entire rock and roll community. The Hall may have a building in Cleveland, but as a lot of you guys know, the true Hall of Fame lives in our record collections, our concert memories, and in the hearts of fans. It lives in the music itself, powerful, rebellious, and real. Everything the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is not. That brings us to the end of today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and we'll see you again in Rock Culture Stories. Take care.